Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of Brain Scratch Searchlight. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for caring about these cases like I do. And if you're wondering, John, where's the intro clip? We usually start these videos with a family member talking about their loss. This is a case that is a cold case from 1987, but with the lack of information that's out there, you might think it's a cold case from the 1940s. No clips available of families speaking about this case, and a really big question in terms of what's going on with someone close to the person that went missing. Let's go ahead and catch you guys up by taking a look at Facebook here and a search result for Cassandra Durham. And if you've been watching, I've got news feeds basically for missing persons cases. This case has been popping up on several publications. I thought, hey, that must mean that there's enough information to get into this. And while there isn't a whole lot of information, there is something that's clear. There's a detective that's working really hard on this case. He's looking for help. We now have the FBI that's kind of put the word out there also through VICAP. And some of the publications seem to even be kind of misunderstanding what's actually going on with the case at this point. Thankfully, we have that detective speaking and kind of clearing things up a bit. But if we see this article here, FBI reopens cold case into woman last seen in Michigan in 1987. It's not exactly what's happening. Basically, we're hearing from the detective that this case has been active for several years at this point. Regardless, I don't want to knock whatever the catalyst is that all of a sudden made all these publications jump in. I'm glad. Unfortunately, there just isn't a lot of good sources. This is a case that has had no journalism, basically. When I heard it was in 1987, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to go to newspaper archives. I'm going to have to do my usual digging around there. There's nothing. There is nothing for this case. As a matter of fact, even for the history of Cassandra, I'm doing guesswork to basically try to stitch it together for you guys. But let's learn just for a second. I believe it has to do with this kind of VICAP release from the FBI. I think this is part of why this new run of articles has started. The interesting thing is, if you look at the actual kind of form that they put out for the VICAP alert, it looks like it actually hit at some point in February of this year. So I'm not sure. Something caught in someone's mind, and all of a sudden a new run of articles, basically all with the same few details, but we'll get through those and get a little more understanding as well from an interview that detective did. But what is VICAP? The Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, or VICAP, maintains the largest investigative repository of major violent crime cases in the U.S. It's designed to collect and analyze information about homicides, sexual assaults, missing persons, and other violent crimes involving unidentified human remains. And that last term is something where I think it's really important to talk about this case, to raise awareness to this case, because I believe there is a very, very good chance that it could be one of you out there that actually helps move this case forward. And I'll tell you why when we get to that. But let's start taking a look at NamUs of the basic information that we have for Cassandra Elizabeth Durham, a white female. Date of last contact, they're saying August 1st, 1987. I don't know how hard that date is. Basically, she takes a trip with her boyfriend, and he comes back at some point, and even that doesn't seem to be exactly clear if he came back that year or the following year. He comes back, and it seems like she doesn't. So I'm not sure about, sometimes I'll see on NamUs, they'll just drop in the first of the month if they don't really have a solid date. So, but according to this record, August 1st, 1987, went missing from Roscommon, Michigan. And what's interesting about this case, we hit a lot of these cases where we don't know what law enforcement you're supposed to speak to. And we talk to families that run into this, We tried to open the case where we live with our daughter. They wouldn't let us because they're like, that's not where she was last seen. And sometimes it's the opposite way. Sometimes they'll try to open the case where the person was last seen, and they're like, nope, this isn't where they live. You have to open it back in their hometown. So this is a case where it looks like it's actually being handled primarily by Michigan, so where she went missing. However, Maryland, where she's from, is aware, is assisting with the case. And then, of course, we've got the FBI having some level of involvement here as well. We are talking about a case that's spanning multiple states. We're talking about a case that seems to have, on the most basic of details that we have, some potential to be a Gabby Petito type situation. Two of them go for a summer trip. One of them comes back. But let's continue with these details here. She was 19 years old at the time that she went missing. She would now be 56 years old. She stood at 5 foot 5 inches tall at the time she went missing, and she weighed around 110 pounds. And in terms of the details, let's see what we get here. Last contact was with her father over the phone in August of 1987. So once again, kind of alluding to the fact that we don't have a hard date on that. She was staying with her boyfriend's grandfather near Roscommon, Michigan. She left Baltimore, Maryland with her boyfriend, also from Baltimore, Maryland. Boyfriend returned to Baltimore, Maryland around 1988 or 1989. So we're talking a period of time where he stayed away. This isn't just a summer trip. Maybe that was the original intent, but she goes, last contact with her is in August of 87. He doesn't come back to his home where he's from for possibly a year or longer. And then this closes out with her father has not heard from his daughter since. She has brown hair. It was neck length at the time she went missing, blue eyes. And interesting information on tattoos here. 2 tattoos on her hip/thigh. Unknown which was on what side, but on one side were her boyfriend's initials, EB. And on the other side, initials of her college sorority, unknown. Why that's unknown is kind of a big question. It has me wondering about the possibility of them sitting on that information in terms of possibly using it as an identifier for maybe if someone has information about the case. I don't know how strong that would be. Trying to find about her history, when I'm doing these videos for you guys, I'm always trying to find points about the person, their personality, their likes, their interests. And that's not just because we're trying to make this video more entertaining in some way. It's because I'm trying to make some hooks into your memory about Cassandra. And in this case, we just don't have it. Like, all I've got is she's 19 years old. That's about it. I went looking through some records, and we always ask, we have the big message at the start of these videos that, don't go looking for these people in real life. Don't go after these people. I know that you're our Searchlight audience. You know the right ways to help, and I'm going to give you a really big task to take on that I think could be very helpful to this case by the end of the video. But I found some records. I believe that they're correct. The birth date matches up for the age for Cassandra Elizabeth Durham. It looks like she, at least at some point, was in Kentucky or possibly born in Kentucky. And after I did all this work, I wound up in the Web Sleuth thread and saw someone else basically kind of came to the same conclusions as well. If that piece is accurate, it looks like she might have 2 siblings, 2 younger brothers as well. And as a matter of fact, someone even did one step further than me. Suba W0067 pulled up this photo. I'm not going to use it in the official photos that kind of scroll down below because I'm not 100% sure. It looks like it's a good match for Cassandra. And again, the age kind of matches up. When I went looking for birth records on this, I basically found only 2 possibilities that were right for the year of her birth, and one of them was in the UK. So obviously, I don't think that one was accurate. This seems to be a match for that birth record that I found, and it's also in Kentucky. So I think this is Cassandra, and if that's accurate, I think she also has 2 younger brothers. None of the articles have any mention of her mother. I think one of the later posts, there's someone in Web Sleuths, and I'm sorry I'm sharing it with you guys like this, but we just have to keep a big question mark around this kind of socially sourced information. One of the other posts says that they believe that her parents divorced in 1983 or 1984, something like that. Honestly, that's like all of the kind of interpersonal information that I could find on this case. I did send a message to the detective that's working on this case. I did get one little reply back so far, and I basically told him that if the family would like to be interviewed in another piece on the channel here, please let them know that I'm up for doing that, and him as well. If they want to come on together, we would absolutely do that here on the channel in a follow-up segment. But I just wanted to start the ball turning, and I've got, like I said, I've got this idea where you guys could be really helpful in this case at this point that we'll get to. But for interpersonal information, that is all we know. 19 years old, 1987, takes a vacation with her boyfriend and disappears. Let's learn about where this case is taking place by learning a little bit about Roscommon, Michigan. Roscommon is a village in and the county seat of Roscommon County, Michigan, United States. The population was 981 at the 2020 census. The community was named after the county, which itself is named after County Roscommon in Ireland. The village has a total area of 1.6 square miles, and a tiny amount of it, 0.01 square miles, is water. Now that's for this actual little neighborhood, but if we look in this area, we've got a lot of water. We've got giant lakes that are around this area, and we know that they're driving through this area. So when we start looking at a map and considering this, we've had several cases in the past where unfortunately, we have this situation. One significant other comes back and the other one doesn't. And it just stretches the search area, sometimes across multiple states. That's exactly what we have in this case. Now, that being said, it seems like we can kind of lean on the fact that she actually made it to Roscommon because she spoke to her father from there. So about Roscommon in particular, from Michigan.org, Higgins Lake is the 6th most beautiful lake in the world. Some of the best outdoor activities are offered in this area: canoeing, kayaking, fishing, golfing, jet skiing, swimming, sitting by the lake, and birding. The list is too long to continue. So Higgins Lake is a local water source. It's one of two kind of significant water sources that are close to, the center of Roscommon. But I'm not 100% sure that, when she goes missing, it's from this particular area because they're traveling around in this vacation. So here at FBI.gov, this is kind of the poster version of the VICAP alert that's been put out. And there's just some additional details I want to share with you guys from this. Possible states of travel include Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Michigan. So basically the route that you would take between Maryland and Michigan, although a route that kind of wraps close to those water sources, to those lakes there. During the summer of 1987, Cassandra Durham and her boyfriend left their home in Baltimore, Maryland to travel for a vacation. So the way that's phrased, like I can't even tell you 100% sure, were they living together? It says that they left their home, but they could just be referring to the city of Baltimore as well. Cassandra told family that they were in Roscommon, Michigan, visiting her boyfriend's grandparents. Now, in some descriptions, they're being more specific than that. They're saying actually grandfather. And, of course, I would like to think, hey, I hope that person's been spoken to or been questioned. A grandparent back in 1987, the odds that grandparent is still alive today, probably not very high, but hopefully there was an interview done back at the time. Maybe that's in the police file. She did not indicate where they were going after visiting his grandparents. When her boyfriend returned to Maryland, Cassandra was not with him. So that explanation is actually even a little more detailed on one side, less detailed on the other than NamUs. And this is why we're looking at the multiple sources and trying to pull this together. Over at West Michigan's MIX Mix 95.7, they've got an article on this. The Michigan State Police announced this week that they are reopening the decades-long missing person cold case of Cassandra Durham. Now, here's another thing. Like, here they're saying it's the Michigan State Police that are announcing that they're reopening the case, which is interesting because that is where the detective that's working this case is from. And he's saying, no, we're not reopening it. It's from what I understand, it's been on his desk since 2019. So regardless, whatever it was, if it's an accident or not, it's helpful because now we're talking about this case. She and her boyfriend, identified only as having the initials EB, were traveling from Maryland to Michigan to visit her boyfriend's grandparents near Roscommon. They're kind of analyzing it the same way I would. We're taking a look at the map here. Michigan State Police said that the couple set out on their journey in a 1980 Honda Civic station wagon. And it's believed that they made a stop at Cedar Point along their journey. So a 1980 Honda Civic station wagon. It looks something like this. And I'm not 100% sure on the station wagon component. There is one interview that's been done with a detective, and in that he described it as a Honda Civic hatchback. But this station wagon also looks like it does have the hatchback. In that interview, he did also disclose that it is green, though, which is a detail that hasn't been released anywhere else. So green Honda Civic. Basically, if it's not the station wagon version, the only difference is that this extra back panel here is gone. Basically, the hatchback just comes kind of really close to that rear door, and that's it. And they made a stop at Cedar Point along their journey. Let's go ahead and pull up a map so we can see that. And you'll see that that kind of pulls their driving path a bit closer because it gets them close to Lake Erie. And of course, you guys know I'm always concerned about water sources when we're looking into missing persons cases. It just seems like it comes into play a lot when we do make discoveries on these cases. Here, it's known that they stopped at some point, at some time, at Cedar Point. And it's obviously on the drive there. We don't know about the timing in terms of, was that on their way up? Was it possibly on their way back down? And honestly, that's another interesting question with this whole thing. If he doesn't come back to Maryland for a year or two, where does he stay during that time period? There might not actually be any trip back. There might just be one trip out, but all we know is that at some point they're confirmed to have been at Cedar Point. While the boyfriend claims that they both returned to Maryland, Cassandra's father says that she never made it home. She hasn't been seen since. And even if you consider, okay, well, maybe they were going on a prolonged trip. Maybe it wasn't just a summer trip. They were actually going to be gone for several months, or maybe they were testing moving or something along those lines. If she's got a tattoo of her sorority house and she's 19 years old, she's at least started college. Did she stop it? Did she drop out or something? Just opens more questions about what's going on with her life at the time of this trip. And what's important about that is just, would the dynamics of what we're seeing make sense, especially with EB not coming back for seemingly a year or longer? It certainly seems suspicious. I think most of us have that feeling about this case. Investigators believe the couple may have also driven through Pennsylvania to make their trip, which makes sense if you look at the map. I mean, they really wouldn't have too much of an option on that if they were kind of doing a direct route. Their car allegedly broke down around Detroit, where the boyfriend bought an Oldsmobile Cutlass to continue their trip, according to the state police. Again, we don't know the timing. With that, is that on the way back or is it on the way out? Because Detroit is right here, just kind of around the edge of Lake Erie from Cedar Point. And in terms of that car, we don't have a color. We only have the make. And I know from that later interview that was found, they believe it was a late 1960s or possibly 1970s Oldsmobile Cutlass. And you can see, even just me rolling it back from the 1980s to the 1970s model, pretty big difference. These look pretty different. And let me just bring up 1960s model for a moment. Now that looks early 60s. They were thinking more late 60s. So I would say something along these lines, or possibly this. Something in that body type is what I believe they would be looking for. But again, we don't know the color on that. And in terms of the details being released about this case officially in that first run of news articles, that's about it. We have another little bit of information here from an email. The MSP Houghton Lake Post has reopened a missing person complaint the agency wrote in an email. We don't have any new leads or information to share. This is a cold case. Once again, I don't know what they mean by reopened when the detective says that it's been open since about, that it's been worked on actively since it landed on his desk in 2019. And they did post about this a little bit on X. Someone named I May Be Dumb replied, "Have you looked at the boyfriend?" And interestingly, the MSP 7th District responded to that and said he has been interviewed. So it seems like it's definitely a consideration for them. It's weird. I don't like theorizing in this way, but we don't know anything about this case. With the way the messaging has been put out in terms of the profile that was written up by NamUs, which those are usually coordinated in some form with law enforcement. Like anyone can go ahead and create a NamUs record. I've done several, but staff at NamUs then reaches out to law enforcement, confirms the information before that post goes public. So the phrasing of this stuff, she went away with her boyfriend, she spoke with her father while she was away, boyfriend comes back and she doesn't, that's been engineered to a certain amount. And that's leading me to believe that any suspicion is kind of in that direction. If we didn't have things phrased that way, you might also wonder, well, what's going on with the home life? Is there something potentially going on there? Would she have left of her own accord for some reason? Would the boyfriend have known that? Would he have been able to tell police that? Would that have changed their narrative in terms of how they explain this case to the public with their press releases and on NamUs and things like that? I think so. So it doesn't seem like we're looking at that type of situation. And honestly, I don't know that VICAP would have even kind of come into play if it was that type of situation, if they had enough elements that were kind of leaning in that direction. So interesting to me that, and even to the point of this formerly tweet, I don't know what they're called now, I guess just post, he has been interviewed. They're actually responding to that with that information. So a little insight you might be able to take from that. And a lot of people just wondering, over on Click on Detroit, they posted their article about this case, and we have some commenters. I don't understand how they don't know what leg the tattoos are on or the initials of them. That makes absolutely no sense. How does the father not know what fraternity his daughter was in? Some of this just doesn't add up. It's a good point, but along those lines, you could also raise the question of why is there no description of clothing last seen and where she was last seen. That's one of those things when we look at a lot of these cases that might have some kind of domestic violence type element. Those details seem to be missing. Last person that they're seen with, their significant other. We don't know where. Significant other doesn't say what they were wearing. Like, there's a certain amount that I think we can take from not having that information publicly available, even just in the NamUs profile, where it makes you question, is the boyfriend really being cooperative in this case or not? And no one in particular also commented, sounds like a buried in the backyard scenario. I'm hoping they are checking that property. One of the reasons why I was so concerned about the grandparents' or grandfather's property, have the grandparents or the grandfather been interviewed? Has their property potentially been looked at? I would think a forensic search of the property probably wasn't in the cards. They're really not going to be able to do that unless the property owner agrees to it, which, if you are right about that suspicion that someone's buried in the backyard, they're not going to agree to it. So that's not going to happen. Or you have to have enough evidence to take to a judge and have the judge execute a warrant, an actual search warrant. And at least with the details that I'm seeing around this case, this doesn't look like it's a case at that level. I could be wrong because they're being extremely tight-lipped about this case. Or they were. It seems like maybe now law enforcement's recognizing, hey, this case is for some reason gaining some traction, and people are talking about it. Maybe we should start talking as well. In the center of this picture is Sergeant Detective Brett Nichols. He is the one that is working this case from the Michigan State Police Department, and he's the one dressed like the detective. He's not wearing a uniform, standard uniform there. He was interviewed over on WWJ 950 News Radio, and let's take a little listen to a clip I want you guys to hear from him.
Right, and what stands out with this is that Cassandra Durham and her boyfriend at the time in 1987, her boyfriend Eric Boykema, both from Baltimore, Maryland,
Okay, so I listened to a different feed of that same clip, and I think the last name was redacted on that one. That's the first time I actually heard this. So I knew his name was Eric, because that is brought up several times in this interview. So I knew the E for B, but I did not know the last name was Boikama. And as I do some research on that, it looks like that is literally breaking now. I'm starting to see some articles that are mentioning his name, including something here at the Detroit News. Let's see here. Yeah, her boyfriend, Eric Boikama, also had family in the Detroit area. So his name is now public. We know what the EB stands for. Interestingly, we still don't know what the other tattoo would be. And just doing a quick read through on this, yeah, no other new details. Well, they're saying here that her father last heard from her on September 1st, 1987, when she called from the Roscommon area to say that the couple was visiting Boikama's grandparents. Yeah, everything else looks like it's basically taken from that interview as well. Still don't know what those initials are for the tattoo. Wow. Okay, so we now know who EB is, and you can see I had it listed here. I was going to tell you guys that his first name was at least Eric. Green 1980 Honda Civic hatchback station wagon is what they've said here. In the original interview, they only said hatchback. Here in the write-up, this is WWJ's actual write-up about that interview. They've made a clarification, hatchback station wagon. I've actually asked Detective Nichols about that. I don't know if I'm going to get a reply from him in time to be able to share that with you guys, but just know there's a little bit of question on that for me. Back to another quote from Detective Nichols here. He apparently had family down in the Detroit area that they visited, and also family up in the Roscommon area that they visited. So sounds like he's got some leads there he can go check on. But then we hit this next condition. I've not been able to track any of that family down to figure out what family they visited so I could talk to them and try to get some ideas. But we're looking for anything that anybody saw if they knew Eric and Cassandra. So that's really interesting, hearing that, well, they stopped in Detroit because he had some family there. They went further north because that's where his grandparents were. I have to assume that they were able to track down the grandparents and at some point interview them. It seems like in particular for the Detroit area, they don't know who those family members are. And you've got a detective working on trying to find these people and he can't. Makes me wonder about that story. Are those details accurate? If the details are accurate, are those people aware of what happened? And that's why they're not so easy to track down at this point. There's just so many possibilities with this case. Another quote from Detective Nichols here. It's unknown right now if they had any friends of associates that they met up with during their travels. We're just looking for any information related to that. And he is pointing out again here, we received this case in 2019 here in Michigan, and we've been working with the Maryland State Police on this. They're helping us with leads and vice versa. This case has not been reopened because it was never closed. And at this point, we really rely on the public for things like this. When they see this thing, it might spark a memory. They might remember seeing something. That's part of the reason why I was so motivated to do this video for you here today, even if it's not going to be the longest episode of Searchlight or have the most in-depth detail. We've got 4 different states that we're trying to cover here, where there might be sprinkles of information about this case, a case that is decades old. There's not a ton of detail in the public discourse, so we need to kind of drum up some conversation for these details to start coming forward. There is a web sleuth thread on it. Not a ton of additional detail that's being whipped up there. It's starting to spin up now more over the past day or two. There's certainly some conversation starting to spin there. I went looking for social media connections in terms of her family. I would have really liked to have at least spoken to her brothers, maybe. I think there's a chance one of them might be deceased, but again, I can't really trust these records because I'm not seeing a perfect fit with how it all comes together. But I can't find any social media footprint for the family where I felt comfortable enough reaching out to that and saying, I think you might be related to this person. I'm looking to help. That's why I'm going in the direction I am in terms of speaking to the detective, asking him to speak to the family. And if they do want to come on the channel, we'll have them come on here. There was some more information that he shared that I just want to tell you guys about. in that interview. And that was, he talked about a tip that came in from Detroit where a body was found burnt. It was in a parking lot off of a freeway in Ohio. And they actually processed that lead, and DNA showed that it wasn't Cassandra. And basically what's important about that is that tells us that there is DNA in this case. I don't know if they had a sample of hers, if she had a hairbrush she left behind at home or something, or if they actually got that from her family, but they've got some reasonable means of testing for DNA, which is one of the things I was concerned about, because when I look at NamUs, and you can only see this if you actually log in, I checked the comparisons page, which is essentially where the missing person record has been tested against unidentified decedent records. And there, according to NamUs, has been no comparisons. I would say that that means no comparisons that have been performed by NamUs. Obviously, we have the detective saying they tried one, they did a test in this situation, they found out that it wasn't Cassandra. So there has been some form of comparisons run, just not within the NamUs system. And that's where it brings me back to the piece that you guys can play in this. NamUs has another whole side of that database that is unidentified bodies. And you can search that all kinds of different ways. There's been a couple of people on Web Sleuths who have done some searches against it. I think right now it looks like there's almost 15,000 records in there. Is it possible that one of these records can actually tie back to being Cassandra? It's definitely possible. And that's where having people that maybe if you have a little extra time at home, maybe you could spend some time at NamUs, check out the unidentified persons search tool, see if there's different ways that you can run searches against there. And if you do find suggestions, you can actually submit them to NamUs. There is a case manager that's usually on the contacts tab here. And just look for the address where it's actually at NamUs. I think their addresses right now have NIJ in them. So when you see that contact, that's a person you can email. Send them both cases. Basically, send them the URL, like this link up here. Send them that whole link for both the missing persons case, and then send it for the unidentified case as well, and say, these two might be potentially a match. And that's all you have to do. The case manager will take it from there. Those types of tests don't happen instantly. I'm constantly hearing about funding issues when it comes to some of those tests and stuff like that. It might take some time, but you might actually kick in the piece that helps find Cassandra if she is on that list in terms of NamUs's unidentified. And as a matter of fact, there's been a few suggestions that came up at Web Sleuths with people that have done that. There's a lot of people in the Web Sleuths community that use that tool on NamUs and go looking. We could see here in 2019, Mrs. Badcrumble came up with a couple of suggestions. I took a look at both of those. One of them has been identified, though it looks like the name has not been released on this. And because we're still talking about a missing persons case in terms of Cassandra, I'm almost certain it's not Cassandra in terms of this identification. There is another one here, a female white Caucasian that was found in November of 1989, found in Detroit, estimated age to be 25 to 35. And you might say, well, yeah, but John, you're talking about a 19-year-old. Keep in mind, when you're looking at the unidentified persons, these are estimates that are done. And sometimes I've seen these estimates be like wildly off. And that's even when we're talking about professionals that are evaluating these cases. There's just so many things that can happen in terms of decomposition that kind of throws things off for that analysis. So even when you're kind of running these searches, like if you see a result that comes in and it says 25 to 35, I'd say that's still in the ballpark for consideration, just like this potential case here found in Detroit. The body of a badly decomposed female was found in the attic of a rental home in the city of Detroit. She was wearing a Bob Dylan / Tom Petty concert t-shirt from the True Confessions tour in 1986. Blonde hair, dishwater blonde hair, straight texture. Of course, we don't have an eye color assessment. Nothing in terms of tattoos. We do have clothing description, but we don't have clothing description on the other side, which makes this case a little bit tough. But that's why I was also surprised that there hasn't been, like for a case of this age, I should be seeing at least 5 to 10 comparisons in here. And in some cases, if it's like a really well-known case, you could have 20 to 30. Like I've seen where this list is just huge. We don't have that happening with this case yet. I think that type of help might be the thing that moves this case forward. That's a big part of the reason why we're here talking about this today. So if you've got the extra time to go piling through these almost 15,000 records, try to find some potential matches, send those in. Who knows? I haven't seen this one on the exclusion list either. This could be it. And unfortunately, that is all the information we have for Cassandra's case. I did put some questions to the detective, but I'm sure his inbox is just a mess right now with all the press that has spun up around this over the past few days. If there's significant updates on this case, I might do a separate episode where we just kind of add that. I feel like we're getting to this case a little earlier than usual for my coverage. I was just really, really moved to do it when I saw that exclusions list completely empty like that. And I'm hoping you could be a part of the solution there. One kind of uplifting thing that I found in this case is there's a website here called solvethecase.org. And I really like what they're trying to put together. It's a nonprofit organization, but it's almost running like the uncovered.com database. They've got a case summary, the vital statistics, but they also have this great thing about tasks and can you help? Find a family contact. Is there a lead investigator? I'm actually going to send this video, I guess, the advocate, Katrina Marshall, follows me on Twitter. So Katrina, hello. I'm going to send you a video of this and just say, first of all, the lead investigator, yeah, we know who he is. That's Detective Brett Nichols. NCIC entry, I would assume there is one. I don't have that official record. And it looks like part of their board is former law enforcement, so I think they'll get that. Dental records, I haven't found any confirmation, but family DNA submission, we do know from that interview they have that, so a couple of these check boxes can be marked here. It's kind of a great format. I like that they have a map where you can kind of browse cases and stuff like that, and of course, it's a nonprofit, so you can donate to it. And just in honor of Cassandra's case, and I really appreciate that they're trying to help with this case as well, I'm going to make a little donation to solve the case, and I'll have a link in the description box down below if you would like to do the same. A case with few details, many questions. I can tell you guys, one of the things I'm concerned about is that switch of vehicles. Did something happen in the Civic? Is there was some reason why he had to get rid of that that's actually tied to a crime that has happened? Or did it really just happen to break down on the way out there? If so, is the Cutlass a vehicle that might be related to the crime in some way? And it's interesting to me that we have what seems like pretty strong details on the Civic. So I think they've probably traced down the registration record on that, but we don't really have strong details on the Cutlass. So was this a legit purchase? Was this just like, here's the cash, there's no title, take off in it? I don't know. I've got a lot of questions. Like I mentioned earlier, I've put it to the detective that of course the family can come on, he can come on as well. I would love to dive into all that with both sides and really learn more about Cassandra as well. I feel terrible that the pieces that can help me help them are really not in play. So I'm hoping that those of you that are watching this video, don't just, end the video and leave it at that. Please take a moment. Think about the states that we talked about here, the path of travel that they would have taken. Do you know anyone in that area? Please send this to them. Please. The few pieces that we have might be enough to get that tip called in. And wouldn't that be great if we could be helpful on this case? A big thank you to everyone that helps keep us here at the channel. You know that we only ever run 2 commercials with these presentations, one at the very start, one at the end. Sometimes we can't run any at all. We can only be here helping these families because of our wonderful supporters. If you'd like to become one of them, please visit LordanArts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or just buy us a coffee, like Ann Peters recently did. Also a big shout out to Angela Welch-Sola, Amanda Beard, and Jennifer Wilson for their constant ongoing support for years over at PayPal. Thank you, ladies, so much. That's it for today's episode. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Please come back next week for more right here on the LordanArts channel.